I heard my salary turned into a punchline before it ever became a problem. You know how much we're paying, Scott? A woman's voice drifted through the conference room door, the kind of laugh that wants everyone else to join in. Enough to fund an entire department. I didn't stop walking, didn't look back. I already knew the voice belonged to Jessica Miller, our new VP of Strategic Operations. Fresh MBA from Wharton, 34 years old, and dangerous in the way only inexperienced people with power can be. My name is Scott Williams. I'm 48, and I've been at Pinnacle Financial Group here in Dallas for 15 years. Before that, I spent 8 years in the Army Corps of Engineers. Those military years taught me something most civilians never learn: how to spot the difference between what looks broken and what actually is broken. In Iraq, a system that looked perfect on paper could kill people if one small component failed. That mindset never left me. Sarah and I had been married 22 years. Our daughter Emma was starting her senior year at UT Austin studying environmental engineering. Our son Jake had just gotten accepted to Texas A&M for mechanical engineering. College tuition, mortgage on our house in Plano, car payments. After 15 years of steady climbing at Pinnacle, I wasn't just protecting my career, I was protecting everything we'd built together. At Pinnacle, I'm the Senior Risk Architecture Director. Not a flashy title, never shows up on earnings calls or company newsletters. But my systems are why we've passed every federal audit without escalation for the past 7 years. My frameworks are why our biggest institutional clients, pension funds managing $47 billion in combined assets, trust our risk reporting without question. None of that fits neatly on a PowerPoint slide about cost optimization. Inside that conference room, I could hear papers shuffling, numbers being thrown around. Just raw salary figures stripped of everything they protect. My $580,000 compensation package, base salary plus performance bonuses tied to audit outcomes and client retention. No mention of the regulatory framework that keeps us compliant across 12 states. No mention of the $18 million in potential fines I'd helped us avoid just last quarter. Just a number meant to shock. When I first joined Pinnacle 15 years ago, it was still founder-led by 2 former Goldman guys who'd started the firm in 1987. Decisions were discussed, not declared. Systems were built with redundancies, with human judgment layered over automation. They hired me not because I could code faster than others, but because I understood how things fail quietly, how small cracks become catastrophic fractures when nobody's watching. That culture didn't survive the growth. The founders sold out to Blackstone equity partners 3 years ago for $2.8 billion. New executives rotated in every 18 months, each one bringing their own optimization initiatives. Jessica arrived 6 months ago with her efficiency charts and digital transformation roadmaps. She speaks in buzzwords that sound intelligent until you realize they're just shields against understanding what actually keeps this place running. Digital transformation, lean operations, resource reallocation, legacy system modernization. Words designed to make complexity sound simple. The question started innocently enough. During our monthly risk committee meeting, she'd lean forward with that practiced MBA intensity and ask things like, "Scott, are these legacy controls still necessary? Couldn't this compliance monitoring be automated with modern AI systems? What's the ROI on manual oversight in today's regulatory environment?" I answered carefully, briefly, and I documented everything in my weekly reports. Because when people start calling you too expensive, they're not questioning your value. They've already decided the outcome. They're just building the paperwork to justify it. What Jessica didn't understand, what none of the new leadership understood yet, was that my salary wasn't just compensation. It was insurance against the kind of systematic failure that could crater a firm overnight. And my role wasn't just a job description on an org chart. It was a load-bearing beam in a structure that most people couldn't see. 3 weeks before that overheard conversation, I'd had lunch with my old Army buddy Mike Henderson, who'd become a compliance officer at a competing firm in Houston. "You see what happened to Greystone Capital last month?" he asked, cutting into his steak. New management decided their chief risk officer was redundant. 6 weeks later, SEC found a gap in their municipal bond reporting. $340 million fine, plus they lost their 3 biggest pension fund clients. I nodded, remembering the industry newsletter that had covered it. "Yeah, I saw that." The CRO tried to warn them during his exit interview. "That's the thing," Mike said, pointing his fork at me. These MBA types think risk management is a software package you can buy off the shelf. They don't understand it's about institutional knowledge, relationships, knowing which regulator to call when something looks sideways. Experience, I said simply. Exactly. And experience doesn't show up in a cost-benefit analysis. That conversation kept replaying in my head as Jessica's questions became more pointed, more frequent. During our last one-on-one meeting, she'd pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop. "Scott, I've been looking at your department's budget allocation. Your compensation represents 31% of the entire risk management division's expenses. Help me understand the value proposition here." I'd shown her the audit results, the client satisfaction scores, the regulatory compliance metrics. But I could see in her eyes that she wasn't really listening. She was calculating. The meeting invite came on a Tuesday morning in October. Strategic Alignment Review, Executive Conference Room, full leadership attendance. The subject line might as well have read Execution Day. I'd seen this choreography before during the military. These meetings aren't about alignment. They're about getting enough people in the room to make a unilateral decision feel collective. The night before the meeting, I sat in my home office in Plano, updating my resume for the first time in 15 years. Through the window, I could see Emma's car in the driveway, home from Austin for the weekend. Sarah was in the kitchen, probably grading papers from her middle school math classes. I pulled out my employment contract and read through the fine print again, paying special attention to Section 12.3, Continuity Assurance Provisions, language that had been added during the private equity acquisition, when the new owners realized how much institutional knowledge was concentrated in key roles. As I read, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Sometimes the best preparation is simply knowing what you're walking into. I took my usual seat in the executive conference room, same chair I'd occupied for years, same view of the 75-inch Samsung display, same quiet awareness that most of the confidence in this room rested on systems nobody could explain anymore. The room filled up quickly. Daniel Garcia, our COO, looking uncomfortable in his pressed shirt. Sarah Johnson, General Counsel, already reviewing documents on her iPad. 3 board observers from Blackstone, including the sharp-eyed woman who'd been asking pointed questions during our quarterly reviews. Jessica stood at the front, laptop connected, remote control in hand. She'd clearly rehearsed this moment. Her navy blazer was pressed, her blonde hair pulled back in what Sarah called her serious business look. She smiled the way people do when they think they've already won. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making time for this strategic alignment session." Her voice carried that confident tone they teach in business school presentations. As we head into Q4, it's critical that we examine our resource allocation with fresh eyes. She clicked to the first slide. Operational excellence through strategic right-sizing. Buzzword bingo, I thought. In the Army, we'd have called this death by PowerPoint. Today's discussion focuses on legacy operational structures that may no longer align with our growth trajectory. Another click. A pie chart appeared showing departmental expenses. Risk management represents 23% of our operational overhead, significantly above industry benchmarks. I felt the room's energy shift slightly. People were starting to understand where this was headed. "Now, I want to be clear," Jessica continued, her voice taking on that carefully modulated tone executives use when they're about to drop bad news. "This isn't about individual performance. Scott Williams has been a valued contributor to Pinnacle's success." Past tense. There it was. She clicked again. However, modern risk management has evolved. Regulatory technology platforms can now handle compliance monitoring with 99.7% accuracy. Artificial intelligence can flag potential issues faster than human analysis. The question becomes, are we optimizing our human capital allocation? From my peripheral vision, I caught Daniel Garcia shifting in his seat. Sarah Johnson's pen had stopped moving across her legal pad. "Let me be specific about the opportunity here." Another slide appeared. Phase 3, Legacy Systems Sunset, Risk Architecture Oversight, Estimated Annual Savings, $650,000. No name on the slide, just the function. But I felt the room lean away from me, executives avoiding eye contact, legal pretending to study their notes, HR clicking their pen like a nervous tick. The Blackstone observer, a thin man with silver hair, spoke up. "Jessica, what's the transition timeline for this optimization?" "Excellent question, Richard." She clicked to a Gantt chart. We're proposing a 90-day knowledge transfer period with full transition to automated systems by year-end. This allows us to capture institutional knowledge while moving toward a more scalable model. Knowledge transfer. That phrase always made me think of trying to download someone's brain onto a thumb drive. Sarah Johnson raised her hand slightly. Jessica, do we have legal review on the contractual implications of this restructuring? Of course, Jessica replied smoothly. HR has confirmed that all employment agreements include standard restructuring provisions. This is a business decision, not a performance issue. Standard provisions. I almost smiled. She clearly hadn't read Section 12.3 of my contract. The clause added specifically after the private equity acquisition, when Blackstone's due diligence team had flagged the concentration risk in key operational roles. Any questions before we move to implementation? Jessica asked, scanning the room. I could have stayed silent, let them continue with their carefully rehearsed script. But 8 years in the military taught me that sometimes the best tactical move is the one nobody expects. I stood up slowly, reached into my briefcase, and placed a sealed envelope on the table in front of Daniel Garcia. I'd like to save everyone some time, I said calmly. The room went dead quiet. Jessica's confident expression flickered for just a moment. Scott, there's no need to be dramatic, she said, trying to regain control of her presentation. We haven't even discussed transition details yet. I removed my security badge and placed it on top of the envelope. The plastic against wood made a sharper sound than I expected in the silence. Inside that envelope is my resignation, effective immediately, I said, looking directly at Daniel. Also included is a copy of Section 12.3 of my employment agreement, which I believe your legal team will want to review carefully. Sarah Johnson had already reached for the envelope. She tore it open, scanned the first page, then flipped to the contract excerpt. I watched her face change in real time, the slight widening of her eyes, the way her lips pressed together. What does it say? Daniel asked, his voice tight. Sarah looked at Jessica, then at the Blackstone observers, then back at the document. It's a continuity assurance provision. If Scott's role is terminated through restructuring without a 180-day transition period and board approval, it triggers immediate acceleration of all deferred compensation. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning cycling on. Richard from Blackstone leaned forward. What kind of acceleration are we talking about? Sarah was still reading, her finger tracing lines of legal text. Performance bonuses for the past 5 years, equity adjustments indexed to firm valuation, plus... Oh, she paused, reading more carefully. Plus penalty provisions tied to client retention metrics. Jessica's face had gone pale. That wasn't in the HR summary I reviewed. Because HR doesn't review executive continuity provisions, Sarah said quietly. Those are handled directly by legal during acquisitions. I pushed my chair back and stood. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, looking around the room one final time. I wish you all stability in the coming weeks. As I walked toward the door, I heard Daniel Garcia's voice, strained and urgent. Sarah, what's our exposure here? I didn't wait to hear the answer, but as the door closed behind me with a soft click, I knew they were about to find out exactly what too expensive really meant. By the time I reached the parking garage, my phone was already buzzing. 3 missed calls from numbers I recognized but didn't answer. There's a specific window after a decision like that. Too early for consequences, too late for denial. I sat in my F-150 for a moment, looking back at the Pinnacle building where I'd spent 15 years of my life. 43 floors of steel and glass, housing 2,400 employees who had no idea what was about to unfold. I pulled out my personal phone and called Sarah. Hey, honey, her voice was warm, probably between classes. How did the meeting go? I resigned, I said simply. A pause. Oh, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I'll explain everything when I get home. Can you pick up Emma and Jake this weekend? I think we should all be together for this. Scott, you're scaring me a little. What's going on? Nothing scary, just things are about to get interesting at Pinnacle, and I want to make sure the kids understand what's happening before they hear it somewhere else. After I hung up, I drove home to Plano in unusual silence. No radio, no podcasts. Just the quiet anticipation of watching a well-designed system execute exactly as intended. I knew what was happening back in that conference room without being there. Legal teams don't panic loudly. They panic methodically. Sarah Johnson would be pulling contract files, calling outside counsel, running calculations that got worse with every iteration. That afternoon, my personal email pinged with an automated notification. Access permissions tied to my role had automatically shifted to unsupported status. I hadn't disabled anything manually. The system was designed to protect itself when ownership clarity disappeared. Compliance dashboards didn't go offline. They froze. That's worse. Frozen systems raise questions. Offline systems suggest maintenance. Frozen systems suggest something broke. By 4:30 p.m., my former colleague Ashley Turner texted from her personal phone. "Holy hell, Scott! Emergency legal meeting called. All hands. What did you do?" I texted back, "Read my contract, section 12.3. Jesus Christ. Not quite that dramatic, but close." By evening, the first client inquiry had arrived. Not to me, but to Pinnacle's compliance inbox. Teachers Retirement System of Texas, managing $28 billion in assets, asking a seemingly simple question: who was now certifying their quarterly risk disclosures? There was no answer because nobody else at Pinnacle had the specific regulatory certifications required. My replacement would need 18 months minimum to complete the necessary training, assuming they could find someone with the right background. Another message followed from Harris County Employees Retirement System. Were model continuity provisions still satisfied under the new structure? Those provisions, buried in a 847-page investment management agreement, referenced my role explicitly, not my name, but the function I held and the certifications I maintained. At 9:15 p.m., my attorney, Patricia Martinez, called. "Scott, I've been reviewing your contract situation. This section 12.3 is comprehensive. I told you it was thorough when we negotiated it 3 years ago. Yes, but seeing it execute is different. Are you sure you want to proceed with full enforcement? What's the current exposure calculation? I heard papers shuffling. If triggered tomorrow, with current firm valuation metrics, approximately $47 million in direct compensation acceleration. But that's before secondary effects." Secondary effects? Client contract clauses. Several of Pinnacle's largest institutional clients have termination rights if key personnel leave without adequate transition. I'm seeing potential exposure in the hundreds of millions if this cascades. Inside Pinnacle, Jessica was likely arguing semantics with anyone who would listen. That I had resigned, that nothing had technically changed, that legal language could be interpreted flexibly. But contracts don't interpret themselves. They execute based on triggers, and the triggers were clear. The clause wasn't punitive, it was protective, written during the Blackstone acquisition when due diligence had revealed dangerous concentration of institutional knowledge in key roles. If those roles ended without proper transition protocols, automatic safeguards activated to protect both the firm and its clients. By midnight, finance had run the initial scenario. By Thursday morning, they ran it again. Each time the exposure grew as they discovered additional contractual linkages. What nobody had prepared for was the network effect. My role wasn't isolated. It was referenced directly or indirectly in continuity assurances across multiple client agreements. Those agreements had cross-default language. Disruption in one area created leverage in another, which created leverage in another. The Texas Teacher Retirement System, for example, had a specific clause allowing them to withdraw assets under management if their designated risk oversight contact was removed without 180 days notice and board approval. Their account, $4.2 billion. Harris County had similar language, triggered by changes to senior risk architecture personnel. Their exposure, $2.8 billion. When you build systems to survive stress, those same systems become unforgiving when stress is introduced artificially. Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Daniel Garcia, calling from his personal cell. "Scott, we need to talk. I'm listening. This situation has escalated beyond our initial projections." "Has it?" A pause. "Legal is saying the exposure could hit 9 figures if clients start exercising termination clauses." "That seems possible. Is there a way to walk this back? Some kind of transition arrangement that satisfies the contract terms?" I was sitting in my backyard watching Emma throw a tennis ball for our golden retriever, Max. Normal Thursday afternoon in suburbia while downtown Dallas was probably in full crisis mode. "Daniel, the contract is pretty specific. Once triggered, it resolves through execution or escalation. There's no pause button. What would resolution look like? Full execution of all acceleration clauses, plus penalties, plus whatever client churn occurs. Patricia can send you the calculations. Another long pause. An escalation? Litigation, which would freeze all client accounts pending resolution, trigger additional default clauses, and probably result in SEC involvement since it would affect public pension assets. Scott, his voice sounded tired. How did we miss this? That was the question I'd been waiting for. You didn't miss it, Daniel. You ignored it. There's a difference. After I hung up, Emma jogged over from the yard. Dad, who keeps calling? You look stressed. Work stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. Are we going to be okay? Financially, I mean? I looked at my daughter, 21 years old, smart enough to know that sudden unemployment usually meant belt tightening, smart enough to worry about her tuition. We're going to be more than okay, I said. In fact, I think this might be the best thing that's happened to our family in years. She looked puzzled, but nodded. Okay. I trust you, Dad. By Friday morning, the number had stabilized at $1.3 billion in total exposure. Not theoretical anymore. It was an overnight recalculation of Pinnacle's enterprise value. The board convened an emergency session Friday evening. I wasn't there, but I could picture it clearly. Closed blinds, catered dinner, nobody touched. The slow realization, settling over everyone like morning fog. Richard from Blackstone would have asked the obvious question, how did we miss this? The answer was simple. They never asked what my role actually protected. They only asked what it cost. Jessica reportedly argued until her voice cracked, that the clause was excessive, that it wasn't intentional, that no one could have predicted this scale. But Sarah Johnson didn't argue back. She didn't need to. Contracts don't care about intention. They care about execution. The call came late Saturday evening. Lucas Rodriguez, the board's lead independent director, a man whose name rarely appeared in public, but whose decisions shaped billions in assets. Scott, thank you for taking my call. His voice was steady, practiced. The tone of someone who'd navigated crises before, who understood that panic was expensive. I've been briefed on the situation, he continued. The board recognizes there were communication failures in how this restructuring was presented. Communication failures. Corporate speak for, we screwed up. We'd like to resolve this quickly, he said, in a way that reflects your contributions and minimizes disruption to our clients. My attorney has outlined the terms required for resolution, I said calmly. A pause. Long enough for me to hear papers shuffling in the background. Yes, we've reviewed them. The board has one question. If we execute the full settlement, does the cascade stop? It was a fair question. I respected the directness. Yes, I said. If executed within the contractual window, all client continuity provisions are satisfied. We'll proceed. The next 72 hours moved faster than the previous 2 weeks combined. Funds were reallocated from Blackstone's reserves. Credit lines were adjusted. Internal memos were drafted and rewritten until they said nothing substantive at all. Jessica's name appeared less frequently in email distribution lists than not at all. She wasn't fired. She was repositioned to a strategic planning role without operational authority, a way to sideline without creating additional legal exposure. When the final paperwork was signed Tuesday morning, Patricia sent me a text. Executed in full. Cascade contained. Congratulations. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the Dallas Morning News sports section. Sarah had already left for school. The kids were back in Austin and College Station. Just me and Max, our golden retriever, enjoying the quiet. Victory isn't loud when it's earned this way. There's no rush, no celebration, just the quiet certainty that preparation met opportunity exactly as planned. Within 48 hours of the settlement, discreet messages began arriving in my LinkedIn inbox. Not recruiters, managing partners, chief investment officers, board chairs, people who understood exactly what had happened without needing detailed explanations. They didn't ask why I'd left Pinnacle. They asked what I could build. One conversation stood apart. Jordan Martinez, managing partner at Cornerstone Risk Advisors in Manhattan. We talked for 90 minutes on a Wednesday morning while I sat in my backyard office. Scott, we don't need you to rebuild what you did at Pinnacle, he said. We need you to design what no one else sees coming. The regulatory environment is changing faster than most firms can adapt. We want to be ahead of that curve, not chasing it. What kind of authority are we talking about? I asked. Senior partner, equity stake, your own team. And Scott? He paused. Your compensation package gets written by you, reviewed by our board, but not questioned by some VP who thinks experience is a line item to optimize. That was enough. 3 weeks later, Sarah and I flew to New York for the contract signing. Cornerstone's offices occupied 4 floors of a midtown building with views of Central Park. Clean lines, understated elegance, the kind of place where serious money makes serious decisions. During the signing, Jordan introduced me to their biggest client, California Public Employees Retirement System, managing $470 billion in assets. Their CIO, a sharp woman named Michelle Garcia, shook my hand firmly. We've been following your situation at Pinnacle, she said. Impressive contract work. We're looking forward to working with someone who understands that risk management isn't a software subscription. 6 months later, sitting in my new office on the 34th floor, I got a call from Ashley Turner. She'd left Pinnacle 3 months after I did, along with 6 other senior managers. Scott, you should know, Pinnacle just lost the Texas teacher retirement account. They cited concerns about continuity of risk oversight in their termination letter. I wasn't surprised. Once confidence cracks, it spreads like ice on a windshield. What's Jessica doing now? I asked. Last I heard, she's at a small firm in Atlanta, compliance consulting. Apparently she's become very thorough about reading employment contracts. We both laughed. Sometimes the best lessons are the expensive ones. That evening I called Emma at UT. She was in her final semester, already accepted to graduate school for environmental engineering. Dad, my friends keep asking about that article in the Dallas Business Journal, the one about you and Pinnacle. They want to know if you're like, rich now. We're comfortable, sweetheart. Your tuition's covered, Jake's tuition's covered. Your mom doesn't have to worry about the mortgage. That's what matters. But are you happy? I mean, really happy? I looked out my office window at the Manhattan skyline, then at the photo on my desk. Sarah, Emma, Jake, and Max in our backyard last Christmas. Yeah, I said. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. These days, when I walk into boardrooms, nobody asks how much I cost. They ask how much risk I can eliminate. They ask what I see coming that they don't. They ask for my opinion, and then actually listen to the answer. That difference matters more than $1.3 billion ever could. Because in the end, it was never about the money. It was about being seen for who you really are, respected for what you know, and valued for what you protect. Sometimes you have to walk away from everything you've built to discover what you're actually worth. And sometimes, if you've prepared well enough, the system takes care of the rest.